Dynasty Nerds on Better Sports Network.
Welcome back. It is Dynasty Nerds. It is the Better Sports Network, the combo made in heaven. And guys, we have a super special show for tonight. Normally at this point, you just see me. You see this ugly mug all by itself. But you see there's two other people on the screen right now, two much better looking men than I am. We've got David Kluge and we got Matthew Bruening here tonight. We are going to be doing a 12-team Superflex mock draft. It's going to be awesome. I love doing mock drafts, and this really is startup season. We've gotten done with a lot of the rookie drafts, and the people that were waiting for the NFL draft to go, now is their time to really get into it. So let me introduce our guest, Dave. Thank you so much for coming on to the show tonight. And you just said you were in Hawaii for a little bit.
I was, yeah. My wife and I, we got married during the heart of 2020. So kind of had to throw all of our plans on the back burner at the time. Had a huge 150-person wedding that got trimmed down to 13 people. Honeymoon got canceled, but 3 years later, better late than never. So just got back a few days ago and hopping back on the saddle and talking some football this week.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Nothing like, big long vacation. Then you're like, oh yeah, now I'll just do a random 2-hour show. No big deal. It'll be fine. Dave, tell us real quick, what you're doing, where you're at, what you're working on, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I'm being an idiot on Twitter just about every single day, so you can find me there at Dave Kluge, really simple. But if you want my actual analysis, you can find all that over at Football Guys, exclusively over there nowadays. So all of my written and video content you can find at footballguys.com.
Perfect. And then my good friend Matthew Bruening. Matt, how's it going, buddy?
Oh, I'm living the dream. I'm excited to be here and do a mock draft.
How are things over at Campus to Canton?
Oh, it's great, man. We're always talking college football, which is by far better than the NFL. No offense to all the people who love the NFL. I'm just ready for college football to be here. I'm more ready for the new NCAA game, which is coming next year. You won't see me on any podcast or any shows for probably like 6 months straight. And my wife might think about divorcing me, but I'm preparing for that right now.
All right, real quick before we get into this and get started, Matthew, give me a quick like Devi sleeper or C2C sleeper that isn't being talked about, like just right off the cuff, no prep. I didn't give you any time to even think about this. So
Devi sleeper. You know what? I'll go straight. I mean, there's this little old school up in Ohio, the Ohio State University. I don't know if anybody has heard of it. Have you? Okay, I wasn't sure. It's a Kyle McCord.
I'm deep into the weeds.
I know you are. No, I'm going all in on Kyle McCord, baby. I think he's getting a little bit slept on with the Devin Brown talk. Everybody thinks he's going to be the starting quarterback. He's going to be much better because Kyle had a interesting spring game. It wasn't great, but I think he's going to put up better numbers than CJ Stroud did. And he's going to end up being a first-round pick next year. All in, baby.
I like it. All right. So for those out there watching, this is a 12-team Superflex Dynasty startup. It's going to be 30 seconds per pick, and all the people that are picking are real people. So we're not going to get any of these like crazy, Lamar Jackson fell to the third round, and it's like that's not going to happen. This is going to be as legit as it gets. So we're going to get it going, but there might be times, hang with us, because there might be times that we pause just so we can talk about our thought process on our picks, what we were thinking, who we were looking at, and maybe even talking about some other picks that maybe surprised guys that went earlier than we would have expected, lasted longer than we would have expected, things like that. Okay, so let's get this thing going. I'm going to officially start the draft. Here we are. All right, we're kicking off right away, and the 101 is Patrick Mahomes. There's really not a lot of debate on the first two picks for the most part. Dave, you typically see what? Pat Mahomes and Josh Allen, one of the first, right?
Exactly, yeah, and a little peek behind the curtain. We got to pick our own draft spots here. So 101 was already taken. I took 102 because that's exactly what I wanted, was one of those guys, Mahomes or Allen. You just can't replicate the advantage you get from having one of those quarterbacks.
Absolutely, and I picked my spot as well. And I wanted to make sure I got one of the top 5 guys. So for me, it was obviously Mahomes and Allen. Then Hurts, Burrow, and Herbert are the other 3 guys, kind of in that like slightly like a smaller tier underneath. But Justin Jefferson went here at 4 right after Hurts. So I actually still get to choose between these two quarterbacks. And if I had like 10 drafts, I'm probably splitting 50-50. Like I really like both of these guys a lot. I don't think there's a lot of risk with either one of them. But I am for now going to go with Joe Burrow. I think it's just a slightly more insulated situation. We know the receivers that he has. Not that we don't know Herbert's, but younger guys still upcoming with Johnston that they just drafted, and then some older guys moving out. It's close, but I'm going to go Herbert or go Justin Burrow. Joe Burrow. I'm putting Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow together. I'm going to go with Joe Burrow. So Justin Herbert off the clock next. Then T-Law, which isn't a huge surprise. And then we've kind of have 2 quarterbacks left. And then there's kind of that tier break that we typically see. Also have Jamar Chase here. Bruening, so it's coming up to you at the 112. What's the perfect situation for you? Like, what are you thinking you're like hoping falls to you?
Well, with it being a super flex, I want at least one of these top quarterbacks to fall to me. And this is what I'm about to tell you guys, all you listening, and we'll watch this later. Know your league settings. I thought this was a rookie draft, so that's why I picked the 12 spot. Had I known it wasn't, I definitely would have gone in a little bit earlier to make sure I got some of the guys that I wanted. But yeah, I mean, Justin Fields just went. He was probably the quarterback I was hoping would fall back to me. I just think he's got a shot to be one of those with his rushing upside. If he figures out the passing a little bit to what he was at Ohio State, I think he's got probably an argument to be a top 5 guy. So he was who I was hoping would fall to me. So sitting at the 12 spot now, man, I don't want Kyler Murray. Oh, it's paused. I was going to say it's not.
Oh, go ahead. I just wanted to make sure you had time to get it. I'll pause it. And if you just want to say your pick and it's paused, I'll unpause it so that way you can click it.
All right. I'm going to go bold here, and I don't care who this upsets. I want a quarterback who can get me top 5 upside. It's a super flex draft. Look, I know there's some concerns about and yet you can pause it because I got to think for a second.
All right, yeah, you think and you explain.
Anthony Richardson has in my opinion, the only quarterback that has the argument to be up there with Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen because of his rushing upside. As much as I love Justin Fields, as much as I love Lamar Jackson, Anthony Richardson is that kind of athlete. I honestly don't care if he is not that great of an NFL quarterback because I'm not an NFL GM trying to win a Super Bowl. I'm trying to win fantasy championships, and that's what Anthony Richardson can do for me. It may be a little bit early to take him here, but he's not coming back around to me, I don't think, in the second round. It's a super flex draft. You've got to take your shots, and if he ends up hitting and if he has that Lamar Jackson, Justin Fields rookie year, what did Justin Fields, Dave, you probably know this. I know you're a Bears fan. Justin Fields still finished the season out as a rookie fairly well. And then obviously last year had that amazing season. If Richardson can do anything close to that or what Lamar did as a rookie, then he's just going to blow up and he's going to be up there if the pick's probably over a guy like Trevor Lawrence next year. So I'm taking him here and betting on the upside. And because it is a super flex draft, I know who I'm taking with my next pick. There's a lot of really good wide receivers here, and there's a lot of good running backs, but I want to win with quarterback, so I am taking Deshaun Watson. I'm going to double up on quarterback here, knowing now I can kind of punt quarterback the rest of the draft and just attack my offensive skill set positions. I think Watson's due for a bounce back year this year with Cleveland. They've built some more wide receivers around him. They've got a good offensive line. You know, I think we kind of forget that he hadn't played football in almost 2 years, and we expected him to come back and just be this absolute, dominant QB that he was in Houston. I don't know that he ever returns to that top 5 guy, but I think he can vie for a top 10 quarterback run with Kevin Stefanski and the Cleveland Browns offense.
Dave, we saw Matthew here take back-to-back quarterbacks. In an ideal world, do you like to get 2 quarterbacks in the first 2 rounds of your Superflex startups?
It depends. I mean, there's a few guys that I will take ahead of quarterbacks, but that's usually what you want to do. I mean, that's a high upside turn that you took over there, Matthew. I like it though with Richardson and Watson. I mean, if both guys hit, you're sitting really pretty, but you could also sink a team pretty quickly if Watson doesn't come back to form and Richardson doesn't pan out. But I like it. It's bold. I mean, the guys that you're looking at ahead of there, Jefferson and Chase in the first round, if you're sitting late in there. The second round, though, that's when I feel like people start reaching for quarterbacks, and I'm not too excited about reaching for quarterbacks in the second round. You see people going for Dak Prescott and things like that in the mid-second. Not a huge fan of that strategy. But I think that if you have a top 10, top 12 pick, it's absolutely worth it to pay up for those elite quarterbacks.
Now, I'm curious, you mentioned Dak Prescott. I've seen him typically go even earlier than this. What is it about Dak Prescott that you're not sure about?
I think a lot of people are still just holding on to hope that we saw back in 2019 when he gave us that finish as the overall QB2. Since then, he's been kind of mediocre. He lost the rushing ability after the foot injury. He's still going to give us a low end QB1 output, but, he hasn't done enough to really secure that what is he, 29 years old right now? I don't know if he's the type of guy that you're going to see still starting into his mid 30s. So when I see Dak, I'm looking at, worst case scenario for him. I'm not saying this is how it's going to play out, but there's a realistic world where Dak gets another 2 or 3 years as a starter. You get low end QB1 output, and then he's backing people up somewhere. So I think that a couple of years ago, you had that insulation where you thought that he was going to be the long-term starter for the Cowboys, and it's not looking that way anymore. So I think that he deserves to be more like the 2-3 turn than the 1-2 turn where I typically see him going.
Yeah, no, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. He's lost a little bit of that upside, that luster that he once had. So I do understand that, but it's also tough to get a younger-ish. I would say he's in his prime. But a guy his age at that position in a super flex draft is hard to get. I would have been open to Dak Prescott had he made it to me at 2-8. I was hoping for Garrett Wilson. I'm a very big Garrett Wilson fan. I believe in his talent, what we saw out of him as a rookie, despite the terrible quarterback play that he got out of Wilson and Flacco and Mike White. So both of those guys went right before me. CeeDee Lamb falling to me was probably a fever dream. I didn't really think that was going to happen. So we get to a spot here where I don't want to reach at quarterback, and I think that's kind of the point that we're at. Dak Prescott, really probably the last guy for me in that area that I really like. So it makes it a little tough here. Normally, I like to build my teams, around the quarterback, but also around the wide receivers. There's not a lot here at receiver either, though, at this point. I do like Amon-Ra, and he was the one that I was leaning towards, but I am going to go running back. I'm going to go with Breece Hall. I think what we saw at the beginning of his rookie season was absolutely legitimate. And that offense is trending in the right direction now with, the aforementioned Aaron Rodgers. That's going to take a lot of pressure off of the running game. And we saw it's not just Breece Hall contributing in the running game, but it's also in the receiving game. So he's getting a slightly discounted because of the injury. I'm gonna utilize that because I think he's every bit as talented as Jonathan Taylor and Bijan. Well, maybe not quite Bijan, but he should be in that range. But he's getting the discount because of injury. Dave, you ended up going with Kyler Murray here. And I know that, you just talked about Dak Prescott you weren't sold on, but there's a lot of people that aren't necessarily sure on Kyler Murray. What are your thoughts on Kyler here?
I mean, he's still just 25 years old. He got drafted so young. And when he's on the field, I mean, he's basically a lock for 20 points every single week. And I know he's coming off the ACL injury, but that's really the only thing that is working negatively against him. I mean, he was still putting up elite numbers last year when he was playing. And, when you draft him, you just kind of know that you're not going to get him for the first half of this year. And even when he does play this year, he probably isn't going to be playing up to the level that we've seen in years past. But I still have Murray considered a elite dynasty quarterback. He's a top 10 guy for me. Probably looking at another 4 or 5 years at least as a starter. Even if things don't work out in Arizona, he'll surely get traded somewhere where he'll get another shot. And that rushing upside is just hard to replicate.
We were talking about that a little bit last week on Kyler, where I do think he's an undervalued asset right now, a good trade target, because I am legitimately concerned that this team could be one of, if not the worst team in football this year, and they draft quarterback. But with his contract, that insulates your risk with Kyler, because he's either going to be the starting quarterback for the Cardinals or he's going to be the starting quarterback somewhere else. So he's going to be a starter at some point. What are your feelings, Matt, on Kyler?
Yeah, I think it's actually a great pick here by Dave, because if he does bounce back to even 80% of Kyler Murray, I mean, 100% of Kyler Murray is a top 5 quarterback. 80% is what, probably top 10. And I do agree with what you just said on the contract. Even if he ends, if Arizona's the worst team and they decide to go Caleb Williams, Drake May, which I don't think would be a crazy thing for them to do, Kyler's going to go somewhere and be a starter. Someone will trade to get Kyler Murray, and he will be a starter for you on the NFL side of things. And, I think he's a much better passer than Dak Prescott is. So if you want to go down that argument of like, well, maybe he loses some of his rushing upside like Dak did, I think Kyler, because of his passing ability, is better than Dak's. You still would see at worst probably, high-end QB2 numbers from him, and getting him here again after Dak Prescott and Bryce Young, both going ahead of him. Like, I personally would have taken Kyler Murray over both of them.
All right, Dave, you're back on the clock with 3-2. What are you thinking here?
This one's going to be spicy, and I don't know how you guys are going to feel about this one, but Kyle Pitts didn't do anything last year to diminish his value, but for whatever reason, his value has cratered quite a bit. If anything, we should be still looking at him as, just further establishing himself as the tight end one in Dynasty. All the things that we liked about him as a rookie, the elite target share and targets per route run, yards per route run, he improved on all of those numbers going into year 2, but for some reason, his value has dipped. And I get it. Arthur Smith is a dunce. The play calling there is terrible. Marcus Mariota was awful, but I was actually just writing an article on him today. He was number 2 in target share, number 1 in targets per route run, number 1 in air yard share, number 1 in ADOT, number 5 in yards per route run, and he was 23rd in fantasy points per game. You're betting on the profile at this point, and whether Arthur Smith gets fired or Kyle Pitts gets traded, he is a change situation away from being the overall tight end one in scoring. So I'm still betting on the profile here, even if we haven't seen the production over the first 2 years.
You're right. That probably is spicy, but I really wish you hadn't done that, because that's who I was going to go with here at 3-5. So I think that's a fantastic pick there at 3-2. So just to recap for everybody real quick, first round, we saw a lot of the quarterbacks go, which is not a surprise. Mahomes, Allen, Hurts, Justin Jefferson, the first non-quarterback off the board, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence, Lamar Jackson at 1-8. Then at 1-9, we got Jamar Chase, then Justin Fields, Bijan Robinson, and Anthony Richardson. Got the back-to-back rookies there. Then Deshaun Watson, Jonathan Taylor, A.J. Brown, CeeDee Lamb, Jalen Waddle, Garrett Wilson, Dak Prescott at 2-7, Breece Hall, Bryce Young, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Kyler Murray, and Christian McCaffrey. Then beginning the third round, Kenneth Walker, Kyle Pitts, CJ Stroud, and Chris Olave. So that puts me back on the clock here in the third round. And there's a few different directions I'm considering going now that Kyle Pitts is gone. If it were a tight end premium, I would absolutely be looking at Mark Andrews here. But it's not, so I don't want to overdraft there, even though if he somehow falls back to me, I would definitely consider him in the fourth. I don't think I'm going to go that route. I really want to look at Gibbs here, but I have a really hard time in my brain drafting 2 running backs in a dynasty startup in the first 3 rounds, just because we know the longevity, the shelf life is just not there. But he's already a top 5 dynasty running back for a lot of people. And to be able to get him in the third round and know that I'm going to have him for the next 5, 6, 7 years is still a very tempting endeavor. T. Higgins is on the board as well. Jackson Smith and Jigba is interesting, but I just feel like that's too early for an unproven rookie receiver. So this is a range where if I'm in a real startup here, I'm probably looking to trade back. I probably am not going to be taking somebody here, but I'm going to go down the ADP a little bit since we can't trade. Let me resume this draft. And I'm actually going to go with Tua here. Now, I know that is a little risky for some people, especially considering all of the injuries, the concussions, things like that. But there were a lot of good reports in the offseason about how he's learning to fall. He's taking Taekwondo or some sort of martial arts to help him with that. But if he stays healthy, let's not forget the numbers that this guy was putting up early on in the season in this offense. And I say it all the time: a quarterback, offensive coordinator, and head coach all together in their second year typically perform drastically better than they do even in their first year. So if we see even a marginal improvement, we're looking at a legitimate quarterback one that is still very, very young. I get the risk, but I think he's worth it here at 3-5. Matt, am I crazy?
No, I don't have a issue with it, especially if he. I mean, what was he before he got injured? Didn't he have like multiple weeks of like a top 3 quarterback? I
Yes.
mean, he was on
Dropping
fire.
like 40 bombs.
Yeah, you got Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle. Oh, and they only added like another track athlete and Devon A-Chain behind him as well, who can also catch passes. So as long as they've got Mike McDaniel there and he can stay healthy, that would be my biggest fear, right? I've said it before, especially with Tom Brady last year. Like when you talk to NFL players and they say if you're thinking about retirement, your foot's halfway out the door. And Tua has openly admitted that because of, unfortunately, the concussions. And that would be my only fear is like, does something unfortunately happen to him and he has to step away because of that? And then unfortunately, again, with a 3rd round pick, like that's going to really cripple your dynasty team. But if he stays healthy and he's good to go, then you've got a really good quarterback with an incredible team and an incredible play caller surrounding him for the next couple of years.
Absolutely. All right. That puts you on the clock now. What are you looking at doing here?
So at this point in a draft, I don't know that a lot of people talk about this. I think you really have to pick a lane on how you're going to attack your dynasty drafts. And honestly, I was going to go Travis Kelce or Mark Andrews, and both of them went because Dave said something when he was talking about both my quarterbacks, and I don't disagree with him. This team could flame out in the next couple of years. If Anthony Richardson doesn't work out, he may give me a ton of rushing upside, maybe really good for me in fantasy, but if he doesn't put it together on the field, he won't be a starter for very long. Deshaun Watson might not either. I'm likely going to go, not likely, I already know who my next 2 picks are going to be. I'm going veteran heavy and win now mode. I'm taking Saquon Barkley and Stephon Diggs, both guys who have been at the top of their positions the past couple of years. I think have a couple more years left in them. I'm pushing all in for a championship within these next 2 years with my quarterback situation and now getting Barkley and Diggs. I know that's how I'm going to attack my draft moving forward. And if it doesn't work, I know it's going to be a long rebuild, but I'm going to go all in to try and win that championship in the 1st or 2nd year of this so-called league that we're doing right here.
Yeah. So real quick, you mentioned Travis Kelce. Guys like Kelce, I think, are an interesting talking point because he is elite. I mean, there's no question about that. He's been the tight end 1 6 of the past 7 seasons. His connection with Mahomes is legitimate. There's really nothing else there that really scares you off of him. But he is towards the twilight of his career. Now, could he be a guy that pushes it 3-4 more years? It's definitely possible. Could he announce via Twitter tomorrow that he's riding off into the sunset? That's a realistic possibility as well. So for me, that scares the tar out of me, taking somebody that point in their career that early. But I know a lot of people, like you just said, you would have been fine taking him there. Why are you so comfortable doing that? Because if he retires, I'm SOL.
Yeah, so I definitely think, as I mentioned earlier, it's kind of your roster build. And with what I was looking at with my 2 quarterbacks, I knew I was going to go Barkley here because I wanted a top-end running back. If he went, I was going to go Jacobs. Kelce gives me that top, I win that position every single week, more than likely, unless I'm going up against Mark Andrews. Whoever I'm playing, I'm winning that week with Travis Kelce. You're right. He could retire tomorrow, but he hasn't missed a game since his rookie season. Like, he's been extremely healthy. He's played through injuries. He seems to be very smart, doesn't take these big hits, and he is within multiple. I think he has a chance. I could be wrong, and I don't know. You guys can fact check me, but I'm almost 100% positive he's within all of the top tight end records overall in the NFL. That he could accomplish all those in the next couple seasons. I think that's a legitimate goal of his. I don't think he's going away for the next couple of years. And again, with that, you're getting the number 1 tight end. I mean, maybe, I know we had hoped Kyle Pitts would get up there, and I do think he has a chance to. TJ Hawkinson had a really good year. Mark Andrews. But none of those guys ever really challenged Travis Kelce, and we thought it was going to be this last year was going to be it for him, right? Like, they lose Tyreek Hill, all the defense is going to cover Travis Kelce. He's not going to do it, and then him and Patrick Mahomes go out there and have their best years ever. So I think he's going to be fine for the next couple of years, and I would just bet on him doing that. And if he goes off into the sunset a year early, you still probably get 2 years out of one of the best tight ends we've ever seen play the game.
Yeah, no, makes a lot of sense. All right, so I'm going to resume the little draft timer here, and there are a lot.
Got
of
thin quick.
It did. There's this is a really difficult one for me. I'm going to draft somebody that I don't have in a lot of leagues, but I do think he's slightly undervalued, and that's DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf. I know that we're getting JSN there, but let's be real. Tyler Lockett is at the end days of his career. He's 31 years old. Even though he's performed very, very well, we've seen it over the past few years. It's kind of catch and just fall down at this point. He's not doing a lot after the catch anymore. So I think it's going to be JSN and DK Metcalf. Geno Smith performed very well. If they decide to change, it's because they have somebody that they think is a legitimate upgrade. I don't know that that person exists on the open market right now, but we know that Geno Smith can get it done. So as tough and as scary as that can be, oh, what is that sound effect? I don't even know what that was. That was interesting.
That's the clock running out on somebody.
Okay, there we go. But I'm going to go with DK Metcalf here. So, Dave, that puts you on the clock. What are you doing here?
Well, first of all, I want to say I love the DK Metcalf pick. I feel like people have just kind of gotten bored of him because, you know, he's been in the league a little bit longer than some of the other guys, but he was drafted at such a young age. I've still got him tiered with Amon-Ra and Devonta Smith and Jalen Waddle and T. Higgins. He's just been in the league a year longer, but he's the same age as them and putting up the same peripheral metrics. So I love that pick. I was really hoping that he was going to make it to me. Looking at the team that I'm drafting right now, you know, Josh Allen, he's a locked and loaded starter for the next 7 or 8 years. So I don't feel like you need to really push the chips in to win now immediately. If you've got Josh Allen, I already took Kyler Murray, who's coming off the ACL tear and probably isn't going to be doing too much this year. Kyle Pitts is still in this terrible situation. So at this point, I'm doing the productive struggle. You know, I'd be trading back right now and trying to accumulate some picks if I could.
Yep.
But because we're just drafting with the picks that we have, I'm swinging for the upside here. You know, not too crazy about any of the running backs that are on the board right now. You know, drafting a 25, 26-year-old running back just wouldn't really fit in with the plan that I'm going with. So I'm going to take Quentin Johnson. Landed in a really nice spot. You know, there were some questions about when he'd get drafted, but got that first round draft capital, landed in a spot where he is perceived to be Justin Herbert's wide receiver 1 within the next couple of years, if not this year. So swinging for the upside with QJ there.
He is a very interesting case of, at least for me, because I wasn't super high on him watching his tape. I thought, you know, he lacked some of the elite ball skills that I want to see out of a top tier receiver. So I wasn't super high on him, but he's the perfect example of production, maybe not as much production, but tape evaluation versus landing spot and draft capital. And how do you, when you're going about evaluating prospects, how do you weigh those things? Is it more on like what you see on tape, more on what the production is, what the metrics say, draft capital, or, you know, is it some conglomeration? But everyone seems to lean one way or another on one of those things heavier. So what is that for you?
So, I mean, I don't pretend to be something that I'm not. I am an NFL fan, and I lean on a lot of other people in their analysis. You know, I'll watch a little bit of tape here and there throughout the season. But, you know, guys like you and guys like Matt, you do way more on college prospects before they come into the NFL. I like to go in with a semi-fresh slate on these guys so I can get a good read for them after their rookie season. For me, it really comes down to draft capital. And if a team is willing to invest a first-round pick into a wide receiver, that means that they've got big plans for them. Adam Harstad has done some analytical studies on this over at Football Guys. And really, he says it all the time. The safest investment that you can make for a rookie is a wide receiver with first round draft capital. So, you know, really splitting hairs between Jordan Addison, Quentin Johnson, and Zay Flowers for me. For me, it comes down to landing spot, and I prefer Quentin Johnson's.
So Heavy T goes with Desmond Ridder here. We were talking a little bit before. He is new to Superflex drafts, but he wanted to make sure he got his guy. As a Falcons fan, he said, I am not leaving this draft without Desmond Ridder. So he got his boy here at 5-1. So, Dave, that puts you back on the clock. What are you doing with this pick?
I'm going with Christian Watson here. Saw enough from him his rookie season that I think he's got the you know, the making to be a wide receiver 1. You know, there are a lot of concerns about him being raw coming into the league, but that athleticism translated to the NFL. You saw him taking, you know, little dink and dunk passes to the house, and any wide receiver that can do that is somebody that I get a little bit excited about. There were some questions. You know, he only pulled a 22% target share. I would like to see a little bit more than that, but you can't teach speed, and he's got a lot of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've so far gone with Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, Kyle Pitts, Quentin Johnston, and Christian Watson. And as you kind of talked about, more of the productive struggle route. You're going to be looking at younger assets, hoping that you can bank on their upside. And then, Matt, you've gone more with the win now approach. So it's interesting that we've got both ends of the spectrum here. represented. I'm somewhere in the middle.
On opposite sides of the board. It would be great if we were picking next to each other and weren't sniping each other, but we're doing each other no favors here, picking on opposite ends.
Yeah,
that's 100% true. I'm a little bit in the middle on this one. I do have a fairly young team, but most of these guys I would say are roughly in their prime, with the exception of Breece Hall here. So I have a few different routes that I'm trying to decide between. Part of it is, for me, I used to be really heavy drafting wide receivers early on because the shelf life is there, the production is there. You can build your team around these guys. The thing for me that has started to shift a little bit, not that I'm not targeting wide receivers a ton, but the way I've seen the NFL evolve, the amount of talented pass catchers that you can get in startups now in the 7th, 8th, 9th round is so much more bountiful than it was 3 or 4 years ago. 3 or 4 years ago, you didn't have that wide array, but these past 3-4 draft classes have just given us so many good young pass catchers that there's just only so many spots for them. So I find myself going towards other positions earlier, and hence I only have one receiver at this point. Typically, I would have at least 2 or 3. So for me here, I am going to go back to the running back actually here, as much as there are some tempting pass catchers on the board. And I'm going to go with Harris. I do think that Najee is one of the most underrated assets right now in a startup. Now, look, this is an example of going against where you were at originally. I was not a big Najee Harris guy when he came out. He was actually not even my number one running back in the draft class. Javonte Williams was my number one back in the class, and you better believe if he was still here, I would be taking him. But he's not. The reason I wasn't was I just didn't think that he had the explosive ability. I didn't think he was as gifted between the tackles as a lot of other people did. I thought he was more of a volume play, which is not a bad thing. Volume is king at times at the running back position. He was drafted to a team that was going to give him the volume, but his first year, all of the metrics suggested that he was not producing as well as he should given the type of volume he was getting. Once you also had Ben Roethlisberger retire, we saw those targets drop a ton, but now he's gotten to the point where he's incredibly affordable. When I have a running back that still has 2 years left on the rookie deal, and probably 3 because he was a first-round pick, he's more than likely going to get that fifth-year option. He's locked in for the next 3 seasons, and he's a guy that can get 300 touches. And there's only so many guys in the league that can get 300 touches. So I know that as an older rookie, I probably am banking only on those 3 years. But I think with my current build, I think it's a team that could compete now, but he's still young enough that maybe I do get a 4th or 5th year out of it. And obviously that would be the tail end of his running back career at that point. But I like him still available. I'm taking him often in the 5th round. Matthew, am I crazy for taking Najee here, or do you think he's good value?
Not at all. I mean, Pittsburgh has, I think, we talked a lot about it. I'm sure everybody did during the NFL draft. I think Pittsburgh was a real winner of the NFL draft with the way they handled things. They improved that offensive line. Then they added a great tight end who, when he was drafted, said, I'm the 6th offensive lineman. Like, everything they did leaned toward actually helping Najee get holes open for him to actually run through. He is, at least in my opinion, a very good running back, and we saw how good of a receiver he was out of the backfield. I do think he's being discounted because, he was beat up a little bit last year, and those injuries kind of brought him back from the great rookie season. I think he's in for another great year, and I honestly think he's one of those guys who, with the way he plays, he didn't have a ton of carries at Alabama. He was kind of that last guy hanging on, had a lot of carries in his final season. I think he's a guy who could probably play for. Dang it, I really wanted Nick Chubb to fall to me. That was the one I was really running back I was hoping was going to fall. I think that he's, even once he's done with his time in Pittsburgh, he could land on another team and still be like that second guy in a committee and be good for you.
Totally get you there. All right, so you are about to be up on the clock.
Yeah.
What players are you looking at here? Because you've already talked about it. You have more of a win now build. What guys are you looking at?
So I'm going to wait 1 second because I don't want to get sniped on these 2 picks in front of me. I want to praise Tyler on the Desmond Ridder pick because I saw everybody in the chat. It looked like both of your faces were kind of like, Desmond Ridder, really? When Arthur Smith had Ryan Tannehill in Tennessee, he was QB5, QB8, and QB10. In my opinion, Desmond Ridder has a better skill set than Ryan Tannehill. He's a better rusher. He's got a much stronger arm. And what do you do with a quarterback who is inaccurate? You give him massive human beings that can catch a ball as long as it's in their area code, and that is Drake London and Kyle Pitts. And then they added arguably a generational running back behind him and Bijan Robinson that they don't have to rely on Ridder to throw the ball a ton. I said it earlier this offseason, and I really think it's going to have Desmond Ridder is going to finish as a top 15 quarterback this year. You may have taken him a tad bit early, Tyler. I think you probably could have waited, but I love the pick. I think he's in for an amazing season.
All right. So hopefully not too many of your guys were taken. Obviously, that run there of guys like Stevenson, Chubb, Pollard, Adams, I'm assuming those guys would have been in your target range. But what are you going to do here now?
So I was going to take Devontae Adams and hopefully Nick Chubb, and I just realized that Michael Pittman got taken as well. I was really hoping to try and double up with one of those guys. I'm going to go tight end. I talked earlier I would have taken Travis Kelce, where I took either it would have been Diggs, because I still would have taken Saquon Barkley. I know he's often beat up, but when this dude is healthy, he's still a top tight end. Give me George Kittle. I'll be able to put him in my lineup for the most part whenever he's healthy, and I can grab a tight end to fill in for him when he's not there. Again, kind of building toward that win now approach. And now things are tough. These things
we saw when Purdy took over again too, that we saw that elite George Kittle. A lot of people thought that he was just done for whatever reason, but as soon as Purdy came back in, Kittle was back.
Yeah, I think regardless of who that quarterback's going to be, like he's the safest target for them. And as long as he's healthy, I do worry a little bit. I mean, he plays the tight end position like a linebacker. Like, I don't love the way he just loves to take out everybody. I want him to stay on the field, stay healthy. I love watching him play because it's so much fun, but my fantasy teams don't love it. So I do love George Kittle there. I think that he's going to be fine. I see Josh is saying Goddard and Kincaid. Goddard probably is a better pick there as he does stay healthier. I don't get the love for Kincaid personally. I'm not a big Dalton Kincaid guy. I know a lot of people think he's going to play kind of like the slot role for Buffalo. They've never targeted the tight end, and they don't have Brian Daboll, who's like an offensive genius there. So I'm not that sold on him. I really don't love any of these players right now, but I guess I got to make a pick on somebody. So I'm going to go running back, and I'm not. Yes, I am. I'm going to take JK.
Love it.
I love it.
Love that pick.
They add Lamar comes back on the contract. They bring in Odell Beckham Jr., Todd Monken. If you watch any college football, you've seen what George has done with Stetson Bennett the past couple years. I mean, now you get Lamar Jackson in that offense. They're going to feature those tight ends, and they love to feature a running back who can run but also catch the ball. I mean, JK, he's not the best receiving back, but he is a decent receiving back. I think he's the best running back on that roster. A full season back from that really bad knee injury. I think I'm probably only getting 2 years out of him, but I think both of those years can be within like a top 15-ish running back. I don't think that's too high. So I'll take Dobbins here and hope for the upside in this offense.
I mean, he was clearly hurt last year. Like, he had a limp in his gait. Like, he couldn't even flex his knee. Like, he was clearly injured, and they were still giving him 15 carries a game. So this coaching staff loves him. I'm with you, man. Once he heals up this offseason, sky's the limit for JK.
Well, and he was even producing, like, even at not 100%, still putting up 100-yard games. Like, there were 2 or 3 times where, like, normal J.K. Dobbins takes that one to the house. Instead, it was only a 35-yard run or a 40-yard run, but normal J.K. Dobbins takes that to the house. So I can only imagine what he's going to do. And yes, I think this new offense is going to complement him really well. The boxes won't be quite as heavy because they're so predicated on the run. I think good days are ahead for J.K. Dobbins. Another one that I was hoping would slip a little bit to me, although I already have 2 running backs, so you probably helped me do the responsible thing. But had JK been there, I would have absolutely gone with him. All right, so I'm back up on the clock now. We've had a very interesting kind of round and a half or so. A lot of these older players now starting to come off the board, which we didn't see as much of before. But my pick with Harris is like a borderline older guy, but we got Nick Chubb, Devontae Adams, Kittle. Like, we're seeing a lot of those older players come off the board. But then in round 6 here, back to a little bit of a youth movement. Most of these players young. Trey Lance just went off the board. I know there's a lot of debate on Trey Lance right now. taking him this early. Obviously, the ceiling is very high, but we know that they like Purdy and maybe even Sam Darnold. It's a very interesting situation in San Francisco, but same kind of logic would apply as a guy like Kyler Murray. You would assume if Trey Lance gets traded, he's getting traded to a team that is going to play him and play him fairly early. So there's definitely merit to it. Just a little rich for my blood. So we get here. Now, I don't know that I'm going to do this for this mock, but in a real draft, I would be very tempted to go with a third quarterback here. Do I need a third quarterback? No, obviously not. But when I see value at quarterback in a super flex draft, that's always very, very tempting to me to take that value and then trade it later. Get 3, 4, sometimes even 5 quarterbacks. So that would be a scenario that I would consider here, but I don't think I am going to do that right now. I think instead, I am a little bit nervous about tight end, and I do think that we are kind of at the end of a tier here, and I love getting to sneak in at the very end of a tier and grab a guy. I'm a big Dallas Goedert fan. I think he's a very talented player. We saw him produce a lot last year, despite there being wonderings of Smith is there and A.J. Brown's there. Is there going to be enough targets to go around? Yes, there were plenty of targets to go around. He was still very, very productive for the Philadelphia Eagles. So I'm kind of grabbing what I feel is the last guy in a tier. Is there anybody else that you guys would have? Dave, we'll start with you. Anybody else at the tight end position you would have in this tier or no?
No, I think that you grabbed the end of the tier, which was a smart move there. But I'm looking at a third quarterback as well, and I was wondering who you were eyeballing because I know a lot of people. The smart move is probably to take Kirk Cousins. I don't know if we're getting much beyond this season from Kirk Cousins, so I'm wondering who you were eyeballing there.
There are 2 guys. Neither one is like sexy, but it was Kirk Cousins, and then the next one was Russell Wilson. I think Russell Wilson is a very underrated player because of how poorly his season went last season. So there you go. Talk about him.
That's exactly who I had. Again, we talk about contract insulation. It is impossible for them to get out of his contract for the next 3 years. So good or bad, he's going to have to figure out a way to put this together. And they've invested in trying to help him. Bringing in Samaje Perine is a great pass catcher out of the backfield. He doesn't have the legs that he used to be able to extend plays with. So now he's got that safety valve that he can throw out to Samaje Perine. They locked up $140 million in Mike McGlinchey and Ben Powers. So they want to beef up that front a little bit. I just don't think things can get worse. I mean, it's possible, I guess, that he just fell off the age cliff at age 34, but I'm not willing to write it off. He had a career low in touchdown rate last year, career high in interception rate. I just think that those are outliers. And at this point, I mean, he could bounce back. He could not, but I'm getting him in the 6th round, at end of the 6th round of a super flex draft. And this guy, if you look back over the last 8 years prior to last year, he was a top 10 quarterback in every single season. 4 of those 8 years, he was a top 3 quarterback. So he's got immense upside here, and you're getting him for super cheap. At worst, you're looking at a middling QB2 for the next few years. At best, he bounces back with Sean Payton, and I just got a top 5 quarterback at the end of the 6th round.
No, I think it's tremendous value. He's one of those guys. And look, anytime I put it in a YouTube video or anything like that, people are like, ew, Russell Wilson.
I
know. He feels gross. I get it. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong last year. But in super flex drafts, if you have a quarterback that, granted, 34 isn't young anymore, but we're also seeing quarterbacks regularly making it into their late 30s and even touching their 40s now. So even if you have 4 or 5 seasons, 4 or 5 seasons in a dynasty league is an eternity. I mean, Dave, I know that you're a little bit newer in the dynasty space. Like, how many leagues do you have right now that are beyond 5 years?
Only one, and that's my home league that we've been doing for about 5 years now.
Exactly. Matt, what about you? How many leagues do you have that are beyond 5 years?
Probably 6-ish.
Okay, you have quite a few.
Top of my head, yeah.
I only have 2. Now, one of them is past the decade mark, but I only have 2. So 5 years, think about how different your teams were 5 years ago. And for a lot of those leagues, they didn't even exist. You didn't have a team. So that's how long that we could still realistically expect Russell Wilson to be an asset for your team. So before we get to your next pick, I want to recap real quick, and we are going to take a quick break. So right now, Dave has Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, and Russell Wilson at the quarterback positions. No running backs yet, but 2 young receivers in Quentin Johnston and Christian Watson, and then Kyle Pitts at tight end. I currently have Joe Burrow and Tua as my quarterbacks. At running back, Breece Hall, Najee Harris. Then at wide receiver, only one so far in DK Metcalf and Dallas Goedert at tight end. And then Matt has Anthony Richardson and Deshaun Watson at quarterback. Running backs, we have Saquon Barkley, J.K. Dobbins, Stephon Diggs at wide receiver, and George Kittle at tight end. Let's take a quick break, and when we get back, we will start the 7th round with Dave's next pick.
The Detroit Lions select Sam Laporta, tight end, Iowa.
Had to go with your boy Sam Laporta there to pair with TJ Hawkinson.
Sammy, I couldn't double down on rookie tight ends. I think that would take it. That's taking it a little too far.
This could be one of the most exciting rookie tight end classes in a while, just based on the archetypes of these guys, of the Dalton Kincaids and the Sam Laportas. Obviously, Green Bay drafted 2 themselves with Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave. So after Kincaid, I would say is probably the consensus with tight ends. Like, who do you like as far as the best ball, like end of best ball? Do you like Laporta, or is there anybody else you like more, dude?
I do like Laporta. We're looking for guys that can be a top 2 target on their team. So any path, any argument you could make, right? So you can make the argument that Dalton Kincaid is going to be a top 2 target with after Stephon Diggs. You can make an argument that with Jamison Williams suspended, now Sam Laporta is just going to play straight up wide receiver. He looks like a wide receiver. Why can't he line up out wide at split end, right? It's like Marvin Jones and Amon-Ra St. Brown. I would also throw another name in the ring, and I don't mind, since we're doing this for the fans, for the kids. He's still on the board. Luke Musgrave on your Packers. They're not super loaded at wide receiver. We like the guy Reed they drafted, but you never know. So why can't Luke Musgrave be a big slot? In fact, they drafted 2 tight ends, Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave. Tucker Kraft is more of an inline guy. They might just go 2 tight ends right away. Tucker Kraft inline, Luke Musgrave in the slot. Why can't he be a target monster for Jordan Love? So those are the guys, those are the conditions that you need for a rookie tight end to succeed. They need to not only be the best pass catching tight end on the team, but a top 2 pass catcher on the team outright. That's how you get Kyle Pitts. Evan Ingram as a rookie was top 5 because Odell Beckham Jr. hurt his knee 4 weeks into the year. So that's the formula. We're looking for guys that can actually be a top target right away. Otherwise, we're playing the sit and wait long-term game, which is what you're doing with guys like Michael Mayer.
We are back. We are back, Dynasty Nerds. We've got Dave Kluge, Matthew Bruening here on the show tonight, and we are about to start the 7th round. Before we begin, Dave, how do you feel about your team so far? If this was a real league, how would you feel about your squad so far?
Not too crazy about it, if I'm being honest, but I committed to the productive struggle, and at this point I'm just trying to take as much value as I can. Definitely not winning anything this year, but best case scenario is Russell Wilson hits. I could flip him for a couple of firsts. Quentin Johnston ends up being that long-term wide receiver 1 for the Chargers, and Kyle Pitts gets traded. I mean, I need a lot of things to go right for this team to work out, but like I said, just trying to accrue as much value as I can at this point. I'm actually eyeballing a QB4, but that might be a little bit too aggressive. We'll see where I go with it.
Matt, how about you, man? How are you feeling about your squad thus far?
I mean, I thought we were playing this out. This is a championship team right here, baby. As long as a couple of these guys fall to me, I'm ready to win the championship this year. I'm all in. I love it. I feel a little bit now that I reached on George Kittle, but I'm okay with it because I'm going to win this year, and then we'll figure out what we're going to do after that.
All right. Well, before we get to Dave's next pick, I want to remind you guys about the Fantasy Alarm subscription. That's right. Get all pro access to Fantasy Alarm for their award-winning DFS playbook. covering 10 different sports. 10. Look, I don't even know that I can name 10 different sports, but they cover 10 different sports in their DFS playbook, fantasy football and NFL betting, tools, podcast, Discord chat, the works. It's all there at Fantasy Alarm. For a limited time, get this all for 50% off your first 6 months. I'm not great at math, but 50%, I think that's roughly half. Use promo code ALARM50 at fantasyalarm.com. Start your free trial today. And also, we're doing a little bit with Underdog too. You can get up to $100 match, a $100 match, promo code using Fantasy Alarm at underdog.com. All right, Dave, before I click play or resume or whatever the button is, before I click that, tell us who you're going to take here.
I'm taking Marquise Brown, and this one might feel like a little bit of a reach, but I feel like this guy is just perennially undervalued. The whole storyline the whole time he was with the Baltimore Ravens is that he wasn't being utilized properly, but all the underlying metrics were screaming that he was a buy, he was a buy, he was a buy. Then he finally goes to Arizona, gets in this air raid pass heavy offense, and we saw it in a very, very small sample, but when he was in the offense with a healthy Kyler Murray, he was putting up top 3 fantasy production. I mean, the dude was pulling almost 12 targets per game. He was scoring like crazy. He was doing everything that we had wanted to see throughout his entire career. Then he gets injured. Kyler Murray gets injured. We haven't really seen it, but still just 25 years old. He's still got his prime years ahead of him. Marquise Brown is just one of my favorite buys this offseason.
No, I'm 100% with you. I've actively sought him out different places. I think he's currently very undervalued. And if DeAndre Hopkins ends up getting moved, all of a sudden he's the wide receiver 1 there, more or less by himself. And that could be a very fantasy-friendly situation out of nowhere. Now, I'm a little upset. I'm going to have to talk with my boy Perry95 because he timed out. And because he timed out, Terry McLaurin got taken. And Terry McLaurin was my pick at this spot. So I am not thrilled that that took place. But I will go with another player that I think has good upside and is in the prime of his career. It's where a lot of my players are on my team right now. Guys that I think can help me contend this year, but still have a little bit of a window left. It's not quite the all-in approach, but it gives me more of a 4-ish year window, 5-ish year window, as opposed to a 2-ish year window. Debo, I know he didn't quite have the numbers as before. And look, I get the concerns, but we are still talking about a player that has the upside of a top 5 wide receiver. Brock Purdy should be back at some point in the season. He did like Ayuk, but Debo Samuel can still be utilized in this offense as a true weapon. I know Christian McCaffrey's there, so that hurt a little bit of the rushing upside. But in the 7th round, to get a guy that still has that kind of ceiling that he has, I'm willing to take the risk here. Brandon Ayuk, Joe Mixon, the next couple guys off the board. Matthew, you said that there were some players that you are hoping fall to you. Are you willing to say those, or are you wanting to keep everything tight?
No. I mean, I didn't even want to say the guys earlier, and I got sniped on multiple players. So I'm gonna keep quiet on my last 2. I'll applaud both of you, gentlemen. Great picks. I'm with you on the Terry McLaurin. I'm a little upset, Perry. You can yell at him for me as well. Obviously, he wasn't going to fall to me since you were going to take him, but he was one of the guys that I was eyeing. I mean, I've got my wide receiver 1, Stephon Diggs. So realistically, what I am doing now is hoping to get a couple wide receivers to pair with him. I was debating on possibly taking a player like Kirk Cousins, who we saw just went, because again, I would like to have or Jared Goff. Both those guys just went. To have that QB3. There's some interesting guys left here, but at this point, with those 2 guys off the board, I'm willing to pass on quarterback now and really just kind of honestly attack the wide receiver position. I assume one of the guys that I want is gonna make it to me. And if both of them do, I'll be very happy. If not, I honestly don't know which way I'll pivot, but I'm excited for my next 2 picks. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I can assume who the 2 guys are that are on the board. And
go ahead, tell me. I'll wink if you're correct.
Okay, I'm assuming with a win now build, Amari Cooper and DeAndre Hopkins look pretty tempting at this point for you.
One of those players is correct. I actually didn't wink because I was really hoping that pick would have gone already, and he has not gone. One of those
He is taking a sweet time.
He is. He's waiting for me to wink. It's DeAndre Hopkins. Yeah, I mean, we don't know if he's actually going to be. No! I really wanted Amari Cooper. I was really hoping to pair the Deshaun Watson Amari Cooper.
Yeah, the stack.
The stack. So
you just got to reach for Elijah Moore.
Thank you for we'll wait and let him drop fairly far before I take him. Now I got to find my other guy because he's far down in this queue, and I don't understand why he's fallen so far. I know he had a fairly bad season last year compared to what he usually does. There we go. Deontay Johnson. I just talked about it earlier with Najee Harris. Like Pittsburgh did everything they could to really kind of rebound that offense. They built out that offensive line, and I think Kenny Pickett could have that second step up. He still was targeted almost triple the amount of times that George Pickens was toward the end, and we've already seen Pickens go. He went a round ago. Yeah, almost a full round ago. He went. I'm taking Deontay Johnson. Yeah, he's a little bit of a target hog, but I did just take Deontay Johnson, right? I'm not looking at that wrong?
That's all right. I think the timer went up, so let me I can manually switch it for you.
I mean, I like Pat Fryermuth and all. That is not who I wanted. I swear I clicked Deontay
there you
Johnson.
go.
All right, so
all good.
Now that Amari Cooper went, I mean, see, my big fear with DeAndre Hopkins, I mean, he is sitting at the top of my queue. I don't know if he's going to be with Arizona, what team he ends up on. If he ends up on a bad team, like, I don't know that he's going to get targeted the way that I want him to, that he did in Arizona. I feel like he very much is a target hog right now. So I'm going to take a guy who had
Matthew, let me just throw this out there. Can he be on a worse situation than a Clayton Tune-led Arizona Cardinals team? I feel like any trade is going to be a benefit to his fantasy production, right?
I mean, I'm trying to think of where is a worse team that he could go to.
I mean, I think the only teams that are going to make a push for him are going to be the Chiefs, the Bills, like contenders. Like a bad team isn't going to go out and make a move for DeAndre Hopkins. You'd think
probably true, but like see what would happen, because I have really bad luck when it comes to fantasy football, is I'll take DeAndre Hopkins here going, you know what? He's going to go to somewhere like the Kansas City Chiefs, and then he ends up going to I'll take him. And he's going to end up going to, I'm trying to think of like a really bad team
Tampa
here.
Bay.
Yeah, he's going to go to Tampa Bay.
Atlanta.
Look, I love Baker Mayfield, but my God, he was missing a wide open Chris Godwin in camp footage today. Like that's not going to help at all, him going to a place like Tampa Bay. But I'll take Hopkins, hoping that even if he does stick in Arizona, that he still is that target hog for whoever, whether it's, who is that? It's still Colt McCoy, their backup. Colt McCoy or Tanner Mordecai, whoever ends up, Clayton Tune, whoever ends up being their quarterback there will target him heavily.
All right. I want to touch on this because we saw Kenneth Walker go in a pretty typical range. He goes around 3-1. But the guy that was drafted this year in the same round, a second-round draft pick, goes at 8-3. Do we feel like the separation between Charbonnet and Walker is bigger than it should be? Or do we think Walker is still that guy and Charbonnet is just going to be more of a complementary piece?
Oh, that's if you go back to what Seattle has done in the past, they've used two running backs, and Charbonnet is a better pass catcher than Kenneth Walker. Kenneth Walker, I think, is a very good running back. Realistically, and I don't know, Garrett, I know you guys over at Dynasty Nerds, you do your nerd scores where you rank these guys on film. I don't know where Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet fell out for you guys. I remember Jared Wackerly, who does those with you, was a massive fan of Kenneth Walker, even when he was at Wake Forest.
Mm-hmm.
To me, Zach Charbonnet is a better runner. He's just a better overall running back. I think this is too wide of a separation. We've seen a lot of these NFL teams going to these two back sets. Like, I would not be surprised if those two finish closer in scoring. Maybe Kenneth Walker scores more points, but I think they're both kind of equal in the fantasy landscape. I think they're both probably RB2s. I would rather take Charbonnet at his value here than Kenneth Walker as early as he went.
What about you, Dave? What do you think about those two guys?
Yeah, I think they should definitely be a lot tighter. I don't know if I think Charbonnet slid further than he should have gone, and Kenneth Walker was drafted a little bit earlier than he should have been. But I mean, we know Pete Carroll likes to run the heck out of the ball, and yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be much more of a 50-50 split than Charbonnet being a complementary piece. You don't take a running back that early in the draft without plans to use him pretty heavily. And I think that was kind of what he had envisioned with Chris Carson and Rashad Penny back in the day. Rashad Penny just couldn't stay healthy, and it kind of pigeonholed Chris Carson into this workhorse role. But I think we're going to see much more of a split with these two. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's a steal to get Charbonnet that late.
I think the interesting thing about Charbonnet is going to be because I do see a world where Kenneth Walker maybe gets more work, but I think Charbonnet is the guy that's going to get the more valuable touches. You look at, he's a better pass catcher, Matt. You mentioned that, but he's also size-wise, he's the much bigger, more physical back. So he's probably also getting goal line touches. So while even let's say that it's 65-35, if in PPR leagues, Charbonnet is getting more valuable touches, that's going to even out pretty quickly. So that's going to be a really interesting situation to monitor over there. All right, I'm back up on the clock now, and the guy that I was hoping would fall a little bit did end up still on the board for me, and that's Jahan Dotson. So I got my third wide receiver here. I love Jahan Dotson. It looks like Dave loves Jahan Dotson here as well, but Dotson last year, when he was playing, when he was healthy, I know he had that little stretch in the middle of the season where he was hurt. All he did was make plays. All he did was make plays. But yet he's being drafted significantly below guys that didn't perform as well as him, like Burks, like Pickens, like Jameson Williams, who didn't even really get to play last year. Like, he's getting taken several rounds below these guys, and I don't understand the hate. If anything, he's going to be just – I mean, the quarterback play can't be much worse than it was last year with Carson Wentz. And look, I'm one of the few guys that actually kind of liked Carson Wentz, so I'm sad to say that, but it wasn't great. And then you had Taylor Heineke come in, and he didn't do any favors there for that receiving core. Can Sam Howell be the guy? I don't know. I think he could, but it's up in the air. But it truly can't be much worse. And if it's not him, Jacoby Brissett showed last year that he can make receivers wide receiver ones in Amari Cooper. So I think that he is a steal here. I think he's a young asset that could perform much better than a lot of other people do, evidently based on his ADP. So Dave, you are up, my man.
Yeah, again, just scooping value here as it's fallen. You got a couple-year starter in Geno Smith. I'll take him right here as a QB4 and hope that I could flip him in season for some more picks. But man, I wanted Jahan Dotson so badly. He's a guy that I've taken in just about every single startup that I've done this offseason. I've got him tiered up with some of the other year two guys that went rounds earlier. Traylon Burks, George Pickens. I don't see any reason that Jahan Dotson shouldn't be getting drafted right around the same time they are.
Absolutely. I've seen that everywhere. How do you feel about Geno Smith here at 8'11", Matthew? What do you think?
I mean, if he plays the way he did last year, that's solid. You have now, I mean, Dave talked about going into the season as a productive struggle, but he's got some fairly good quarterbacks on his team. If Russell Wilson doesn't bounce back, now he's got a guy in Geno Smith who might be able to bounce back and cover for you while Kyler Murray is out this year. I mean, I think it's a great pick. And as he just mentioned, if he ends up starting out the first 5 weeks on fire like he did last year, you quickly flip him for some picks or something really, really quick because you don't necessarily need him and you're good to go. But yeah, I love it. He's probably a guy I would have considered had he made it all the way back around to me to try and secure a decent QB3.
All right, Dave, tell us about your next pick here.
Yeah, I was looking earlier and I said I didn't want a 25-year-old running back on the build that I'm taking, but I can give it a 23-year-old who has already shown that he has workhorse potential in the 9th. Cam Akers is a guy that I really wasn't too crazy about the first couple of years coming into the league, but for whatever reason, Sean McVay just keeps showing that he just wants to give this guy as many touches as possible. They had no interest in running backs during the offseason, looking at some of the free agents that were coming through. They didn't address the position at all in the draft this year. Really, it's just kind of an opportunity thing more than anything else. He's likely going to walk into a role where he's going to see 18 to 20 carries every single week. It's going to be a bad team. They're probably not going to be the most efficient touches, but volume matters a lot with running backs. You're looking at a 23-year-old running back that's going to see a lot of volume.
Absolutely. I think I'm not a big Akers guy either, but I do think he's gotten to a point where you see these life cycles of some of these players where they go from being undervalued to drastically overvalued to way undervalued again. And, that's kind of part of the reason I was in on Najee, but I think that's where we've gotten to the point with Akers. I don't love the player, but in the 9th round, why not? Why not take a chance on that upside? I think it makes perfect sense here to go with Cam Akers. So I am back on the board, And it's a really interesting spot for me. I am actually going to go with. Am I going to do that? Actually, hold on. I was going to say it so confidently, and then I was like, I'm actually going to do that. I am. I'm going to go with Mr. Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers, look, I understand the hesitancy, similar to when we were talking about. Oh wait, it's not even my pick. I paused on someone else's pick. Please don't take Aaron Rodgers. But he took Derek Carr. Okay. Although that was like my alternative pick.
He's cursing you in the chat. He's saying I wanted Aaron Rodgers, but now
did
I
he
can't.
really say that?
No, I'm just messing with you.
That would be
just
hilarious.
for show content. We can now not take Aaron Rodgers.
That's right. Just because Garrett said it. No, this is twofold here. One, to get a quarterback in the 9th round that can be a legitimate quarterback one is always worth it. Even if he only has a year or two left, I still think it's absolutely worth it. Similar to what we talked about with Travis Kelce, maybe not to quite the same elite level, obviously, because Kelsey's just doing it differently than everybody else. But Aaron Rodgers can absolutely be that guy. 2, he is kind of an odd little stack with Breece Hall. Breece Hall is a nice pass catching back. We could see some nice connection there. But 3, it was Tua insurance. If Tua isn't that guy, if the injuries are too much, I just prolonged my championship window a little bit by adding a guy like Aaron Rodgers that could get me through the next year or two if the absolute worst case scenario happens with Tua. Matthew, are you okay with Aaron Rodgers, or is his weirdness and flakiness and all the other nisses out there with Aaron Rodgers, are you not in on him?
I honestly don't care about any of that stuff. I've said this before on other platforms, and I know a lot of people don't necessarily love this take, but I know Tom Brady has 7 championships and he's going to be considered the GOAT. For my lifetime, the best person I've ever seen play the quarterback position is Aaron Rodgers until Patrick Mahomes.
Completely agree.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Yeah, a lot of people don't like that take because he doesn't have the championships, but to me, that's more of a team thing than a player thing. Aaron Rodgers is the best quarterback I've ever seen until obviously Patrick Mahomes the past couple of years. And I think he just wanted to get out of Green Bay, if I'm being honest. Recently, he was really good the year prior. Now he's got an incredible offensive line, weapons all around him. Like, I would not be surprised if we don't see him bounce back to the MVP Aaron Rodgers that we've seen before. And he's in a loaded AFC as well, right? Like, he can't sit there and run the ball. They can't not score points when they're having to play some of the best teams in all of the NFL because the AFC is absolutely stacked. So I think that he's going to be in for a really good season. You probably have him for 2 years. And then you may have to, unfortunately, kind of watch him ride off to the sunset, but that's all right.
Hey, as long as Tua is healthy, I can afford that risk. But obviously it is a risk. All right, Matthew, you are up. What are you doing here, my man?
All right, so let me see if the guy just went. I'm trying to double check the board here. Everybody's just sniping my picks as soon as I'm coming up on the board. All right, this guy, injury-riddled season last year, but again, I'm going all in on this, trying to win this year. If you go back and look at what he had done just the past couple seasons, he was a top wide receiver for you. He's paired with Justin Herbert, who is an absolute stud. I mean, you go back, obviously, last year, he still finished as wide receiver 42. Even missing most of the season. That's just how good Keenan Allen is. Before that, in PPR formats, 10, 14, 6, 12, 3. If I can even get him to be wide receiver 26 as my wide receiver 4, I'm happy with that. So I'm going to go all in on a guy that I absolutely love. I think he's arguably the best route runner in the NFL currently. So I'm taking Keenan Allen there. After that, look, guys, I'm just going to be honest with you. I don't think Jordan Love is good. I just don't. I don't know that I trust that they're going to be able to rely on guys like Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs. They pulled the Baltimore Ravens of a couple years ago and drafted 2 tight ends in Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft. And I think Tucker Kraft's the better one. They took him second. They're going to run the ball. And who's the best running back on that team? They restructured his contract. And again, I'm trying to win right now. I don't care if he's not on my team in 2 years because I just want to win in these next years. Give me Aaron Jones. Hope and pray that he ends up as an RB2 and he's my RB3 on my team. I'll take him here in what are we in the 8th round?
10th round.
10th round. Even better value. I love it.
Yeah, I'm all about that pick. I think Aaron Jones is a great selection when looking at your team build. And honestly, I mean, you've done exactly what you said you were going to do. You went all in this year, and you have a team that looks closer to a redraft team than it does a dynasty team. And so you are in this window to win now. And what better to add a third running back that could still perform as a running back one in the NFL? So I like the pick there. Dave, you good with that pick as well?
Yeah, I like it. Aaron Jones just consistently has been one of the best pound for pound running backs in the league. It seems like he gets overlooked every single year, and it's happening again this year. So, yeah, if I was competing, trying to win right now, I'd be looking at him in the 8th round. So getting him at the 9-10 turn right there is great value.
Absolutely agree. All right, I'm about to be up on the clock, and this has gotten tough. This has gotten really difficult because there's not a lot of players I love here. There's not a lot of value I love here. The position I like the most is tight end, but I don't really need a lot of it right here. So I do only have 2 running backs at this point. So I am going to go with David Montgomery. David Montgomery has been productive for several years with the Chicago Bears. I only have the 2 running backs, and I do think that the way my team is constructed, it is a team that could contend this year. So I want to make sure that I get a running back that can get me some points. He's not the youngest, but not the oldest guy either. You could still have another 3 years or so out of David Montgomery. And what do we know about the Detroit Lions? They want to run the football, especially close into when they're in the red zone. David Montgomery is going to fill that role that was vacated by Jamal Williams. We could easily see another double-digit touchdown year from David Montgomery. So I'm going to take that and run. Dave, are you okay with that? Because you are a Bears fan, so you would have better insight on him than I would. Am I searching for fool's gold here?
I'm not the biggest fan of David Montgomery. I've kind of been writing him off for the last few years and, seen it up close and personal as a Bears fan. He's one of those guys that does everything well, but doesn't do anything exceptionally well. But if you look at a team that's a good landing spot for, the Detroit Lions. I mean, that's exactly what Jamal Williams does, just kind of does all that gritty work that keeps you on the field, keeps you in the good graces of the coaches. So I think that he's in a very good opportunity where what did Jamal have? Was it like 15 touchdowns? I can't remember the exact number. It was absurd. And all that work is going to be going David Montgomery's way. I mean, it's what they have with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery is so similar to what they had with DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams, just different players playing the same roles. So, yeah, if you're looking for points, it could be there. Personally, I'm not the biggest fan of Montgomery's talent.
I get it. He's very what would be the best word? Very when I watch him, I'm very whelmed. I'm not overwhelmed. Yeah. I'm not underwhelmed. I'm whelmed.
Like I said, he does everything pretty good, but doesn't do anything exceptionally well. He can catch the ball, he can block, he can run between the tackles, he can get out in space, but doesn't do anything that ever makes you drop your jaw and wow, David Montgomery just did that. He's not that type of guy.
Yeah. All right. So you just went with Rashad Bateman off the board. I loved Rashad Bateman as a prospect, but unfortunately, it just hasn't all come together yet. Do you think this is a year where we could finally see what he could be?
This is being a prisoner of the moment. I saw Lamar Jackson on a press conference today talking about how Shoddy B is the wide receiver 1, and he's happy to see him back on the field. I'm with you. I liked him much more, the idea of Rashad Bateman coming into the NFL than the actual player that we have seen thus far. But he still has that ability to make big plays. And we saw it last year on a very, very small sample size. And now with Todd Monken coming into that offense, they're going to try to stretch the field as much as they can. Rashad Bateman is the deep threat there. They've also got Zay Flowers who can do that as well. But I think they're both versatile enough that he'll get creative with how he's able to use them. So, yeah, this is a guy who this time last year was going in the 4th and 5th round of dynasty drafts and then got injured last year and now all of a sudden is slipping into the 10th. So I'll just take him there and hope that last year was just an injury-plagued season that we can look back on a few years from now as nothing more than that.
All right. Who you taking here then in the, what are we in the 12th round, 13th, 12th, 11th round?
I really wanted Algier. I was upset to see him go. But again, I'm not a college evaluator or anything like that, but the little bit that I did see from Tank Bigsby was exciting. And we know that Doug Peterson really likes to deploy a committee approach there. Travis Etienne, for as good as he was last year, it seemed like he was always getting bottled up when he got into or near the goal line, whether it was dropping passes or getting stuffed at the line. So I think bringing in a big body like Tank Bigsby, he'll get those high value goal line touches in Jacksonville. And I love Travis Etienne. I mean, he looked fantastic last year, but I think that a lot of those goal line touches are going to end up going Bigsby's way.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic pick there. Definitely somebody that I was considering with my next pick. And you're right, ETN, for as much explosive talent as there is, you look at his games, he had 4 running back 1 games that were awesome. And then after that, all the rest of his games were like running back 4, 5, 6 games where he would just fall off the map and you were wondering what happened in this game. Why did he only get 17 rushing yards in this game? Or, why did he drop 3 passes? Like it was a roller coaster ride. And we've always seen Peterson utilize multiple running backs. So I do think Tank Bigsby is going to be more involved than people want him to be. I am now on the clock, and I am going to go a former Bears running back to a current Bears running back, Roschon Johnson. Roschon Johnson was one of those players where I watched his tape, and in a similar sense to David Montgomery, there wasn't that one thing that I was like, wow, that is incredible. But when I watch it in its totality, he was a very, very solid all-around running back. I could have seen him easily going a round earlier than he actually went, but falling to the 4th, the Bears don't have a team right now where there's that locked and loaded running back. Khalil Herbert's an exciting guy, but remember, he wasn't drafted by this regime, and Foreman is a really good player, but he just has a specific role and lacks that explosiveness. Roschon can bring you a little bit of everything here. This is their guy. This is someone that they invested in. Could he maybe be riding the pine a little bit more than I would like in year 1? It's definitely in the realm of possibility, but it's also in the realm of possibility that he's the lead back right from the jump. So right after that, we saw Mike Williams, who honestly was the other guy that I was considering. I think this is really good value on Mike Williams at this point. David Njoku. Now I got the rookie off the board, Luke Musgrave, Rashee Rice, Hendon Hooker, and then that man, Dan, who keeps sniping Matthew Bruening over here. Did he snipe you with the Chase Brown pick? Or are you good?
He did not. That's a little bit early on Chase Brown. I do love Chase Brown.
Okay.
To quote a good friend of mine, I don't know if anybody here is Ted Lasso fans, but as great Jamie Tart said, the players right now are poopy. This is not great. I don't love any of this, but I'm going to take my third quarterback here, and I'm between 2 guys. I'm going to take the guy that they brought. It's between Ryan Tannehill and Jimmy G. I'm going to take Jimmy G.
Okay.
Look, I mean, Josh McDaniels knows him. He brought him in. It felt like the Patriots hated giving him away. He knows that system. I think he's got the talent around him. If he can stay healthy, he should be a fine QB3 for me. Like, I don't love him. I don't hate the pick, but I needed a QB3.
I almost took him around earlier, so I'm with you.
Yeah, so after that, though, again, I'm going to do something that I know I'm going to talk myself into this pick, but I'm going to go running back again because I kind of like my wide receiver room, and I don't think the Buffalo Bills want to continue to just run Josh Allen up the middle when they get into the red zone and beat him up. I'm taking Damian Harris. I think, when he was healthy for the New England Patriots, he was a very good running back. And we saw at times this year, they wanted to use Devin Singletary that way. He just wasn't being productive. If Harris can stay healthy, I don't expect him to be like a world beater. And he's probably not going to be the championship piece on my team. But if he's a guy that I can plug in for a couple weeks, if Aaron Jones goes down or if J.K. Dobbins or one of those guys, I forgot who I drafted with my number. Saquon Barkley's on a bye. If I can just plug Harris in and he can get me 12 points, I'm good with it. So add a little bit of depth to my RB room.
Love it.
I love that pick, Matt. I love that one so much. I've been a Damian Harris guy for years.
Well, gosh,
and
guys,
it's such a good landing spot. I always do my rankings before I look at any other rankings or ADP or anything like that. And I finished with Damian Harrison as my RB25. Didn't really think much of it. And then I started looking everywhere else, and he's in like the 40s and 50s. I'm talking redraft here, but I don't know what I'm missing. I mean, I think that he is going to step into a huge role there. Like you said, they wanted Devin Singletary to be that guy, a 200-pound, can't break a tackle to save his life, Devin Singletary. Now they've got a big, beefy guy that can actually facilitate that role that they've wanted for so long. I love this landing spot for Damian Harris.
Absolutely. I'm on board with that as well. So here I am on the clock, and I'm not in love with this player that I'm about to take. But at this point in the draft, it is very rare to potentially get the wide receiver 1 for a team. And look, there's somebody else on this team that's probably more likely, but everything's up in the air with Russell Wilson and Sean Payton. I'm going to take Courtland Sutton. Courtland Sutton was the guy that was actually the top wide receiver for this team for the first 5 or 6 weeks of the season last year. Then he got banged up, missed some time, and Jerry Jeudy ascended as much as you can with how bad this offense was last year. But Courtland Sutton right now going to be 28 years old. I think similar to how we talked about Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker, I think the gap between Courtland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy is just too big. I think they should be a lot closer together than they are. So this is another one of those players that I just kind of keep scooping up the value later on in drafts, because I'm just not sure why he keeps falling as far as he does. So do you guys think that there's a path there? Dave, I'll let you talk about your pick here that I really like with Chick in a moment. But do you think that there is a chance that he could be the wide receiver 1, or do you think it's locked and loaded? It's going to be Jerry Jeudy.
I think it's going to be Jerry Jeudy. The possibilities there, I was I was in the minority last offseason touting Courtland Sutton as the guy to draft ahead of Jerry Jeudy. And then as we got closer to the season, that flip actually happened where Courtland Sutton was getting drafted ahead. But man, he just didn't look good last year. It seems like he lost a lot since that ACL injury. He was a great separator. He was a downfield threat prior to the injury, and we haven't really seen that since. He just kind of looks slow and clunky. So there's hope now that he's like 2 full years removed from the tear that he can go back to his old self, but didn't really like what I saw last year.
Matt, save me.
I actually don't hate it at this point.
Yes.
I actually think, I know Dave talked a lot about it earlier when he took Russell Wilson. This is a very small sample size, guys. So like we're hoping and praying at this point anyways, right? In this part of the draft. But if you look at the last 2 games of the season when they fired, and forgive me, Dave, what was the head coach's name? Hackett, right? Yep. When they fired Hackett, all of a sudden Russell Wilson looked like the guy we saw in Seattle. And that offense looked much better.
QB2 in scoring.
We remember what those offenses were like in New Orleans, and I'm not trying to say Russell Wilson is Drew Brees, but if he can just, be a little bit more efficient like he was in Seattle, I think we'll see 2 wide receivers be good on this team. And my assumption would be it's going to be Courtland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy. As much as I like Tim Patrick, he's also coming back from injury, tore his ACL last year. So my assumption would be it's those 2 guys. So getting a guy who's probably the wide receiver 2, though, on his team in an offense that could be very good and arguably one of the best divisions in all of football. I mean, you're getting him again. I always keep forgetting what round we're in the 12th round. I mean, give me the wide receiver 2 on that team in a 12th round. That could be one of the best offenses in the league.
All right, so we didn't get a chance to touch on it, but Dave, you took Chigo Okonkwo, Tennessee Titans here, a rookie last year, but flashed towards the end of the year and really looked like that guy with pass after the catch stuff downfield. It wasn't just all this low ADOT stuff that we typically see out of tight ends. It was some big plays. What gives you confidence that he could become maybe that guy?
Well, I spent years hoping Jonnu Smith was going to be that guy, and he wasn't. So now that we've officially written off Jonnu Smith, I'm just changing my sights to Chig and basically beating the same exact drum. Yep. But young, freak athlete, we see it on a very small sample size because it isn't a real pass-heavy offense there in Tennessee. But, his target rate is through the roof. He was number 2 among all tight ends last year in targets per route run behind only Kyle Pitts, who I took a little bit earlier. And the big thing for me this year is there's like no competition. It's Treylon Burks, and that's it. Like most people can't even name another pass catcher on Tennessee. He's got a very good chance to lead the team in targets this year. So just a young, athletic guy with a lot of flashes that we saw as a rookie. This late in the draft, you're swinging for upside, and Chig's got a ton of it.
Love it. All right. Before we get to the next round, do want to remind everyone real quickly about the Fantasy Alarm All Sports subscription. Get all pro access to Fantasy Alarm's award-winning DFS playbook covering 10 different sports, fantasy football, NFL betting, tools, podcast, Discord. It's the whole package. For a limited time, you get this for 50% off your first 6 months with promo code ALARM50. That's ALARM50 at fantasyalarm.com. Start your free trial today. We've made it through 12 rounds. I don't know that we're going to get quite through 20. We'll see how far we get in this, and we'll want to recap our teams, talk about some values and things we didn't like, things we did like, all of that good stuff. But we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with round 13 in a moment.
So I grabbed DK Metcalf. I'm very, very curious as to hearing all 3 of your guys' takes on the Seattle situation now that they took Jackson Smith and Njigba, and where we see the target distribution going as far as this goes.
Yeah, the way I look at it is this: Jackson Smith and Jigba just became Chris Godwin. Where when Chris Godwin joined the Bucks, they had Mike Evans and they had Deshaun Jackson. And Chris Godwin would come in and play slot in 3 wide receiver sets, but then he would come out of the field for 2 wide receiver sets. I think that's exactly what happens early on with the Seahawks, who have Metcalf and Lockett, JSN coming in. Lockett's 31 though in September. So like we saw with Chris Godwin, once he became the man in 2 wide receiver sets, it was wheels up. That might happen this year, might happen next year, but I don't think a guy like Metcalf is ever coming out of the game, so I have no problem with that pick here still.
Yeah, I just at the current ADP for like Jackson Smith and Jigba, I think it's a bit rich. You could probably see him coming off in like the 5th, even the 6th round. But Seattle ran the 6th lowest 11 personnel last year. I just worry when he's going to get on the field. Granted, he is going to get rotated in. You know, there's going to be times where maybe Lockett's out and he comes in or something like that. But they do run a lot of 12 personnel with 2 tight ends. So that's what I worry about with Jackson Smith and Jigba. I think he's a great dynasty pick. I just can't imagine him getting on the field too much where he's going to be able to pay off that specific ADP.
I agree completely. And then from another total wild card perspective, they got Charbonnet. So how hard are they going to establish the run versus how much are they going to pass? It's just so many questions in that offense.
Welcome back in. We got the last 35 minutes or so. We've got Dave. We've got Matt. We've had an awesome Superflex mock draft here so far. And let me start this clock back up. And Dave, tell us who you're thinking about taking here.
Well, wait until this guy makes his pick first. Oh my God, that's exactly who I wanted to take. Was Alexander Madison. Had a whole thing queued up about what I was going to talk about. Yeah, kind of crazy to see him slip this far, especially with the rumors that Dalvin Cook is all but gone at this point. You know, the metrics that he's put up when he started have just been eye-popping, and it seems like the opportunity that we've been waiting for is finally here after 5 years. But yeah, I love that pick. Now I'm kind of scrambling a little bit. There's one guy that jumps out to me, and I don't feel great about this pick, but Juju Smith-Schuster seemed like he was just utilized terribly last year in Kansas City. I mean, unless you are a Tyreek Hill type of talent, Patrick Mahomes is just going to spread the ball out. And that's what we've seen. Tyreek Hill got his share. Travis Kelce got his share. I don't think that Juju is anywhere near the talent level of either of those guys. But now he works into a role in New England where I think he kind of bodes a little bit better for his skill set. You know, they're going to try to get him some opportunities on short throws where he can do some things after the catch. So I don't think that we're ever going to see the Juju Smith-Schuster that was, you know, a top 3 dynasty guy a few years back. But I think he still has the opportunity to at least be somebody that you can rely on as a wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 in New England.
Well, it's one of those situations, you know, that you don't necessarily expect this late in the draft to get potentially the number 1 guy on an offense. And we don't know for sure that he's going to be the number 1 guy, but we know right now that there's no other receiver really challenging him for that spot. Myers is gone. So it's kind of wide open there. So even though I'm not the biggest Juju guy, I can't blame you there. And I'm going to take another one that has a shot to be the number 1 wide receiver on his team. Obviously not the number 1 pass catcher, but potentially the number 1 wide receiver in Sky Moore. Look, I loved Sky Moore as a prospect. I thought that we were going to see more out of him this year than we ended up seeing. But it's true, kind of tradition now that Kansas City's wide receivers, their first year or so, it takes a little bit to get accustomed to this offense, get in rhythm with everything that they have going on here. So I'll take the chance that he could still develop into the receiver that I think he could on a team that just, it's wide open. And, you know, at this point, we're looking for those dart throws that at least have the ceiling to become a player that could be drafted 5, 6, 7 rounds earlier. And I think Sky Moore is somebody that has that opportunity. Matt, I know that you like to watch tape on these guys. What did you think about Sky Moore coming out, and what are your thoughts on him now?
Yeah, I mean, I was hoping for a breakout last year. It's very rare to see these G5 wide receivers be early declares. Typically, those guys are 4 years in college and come out. So that alone led you to believe that the NFL really liked him. I thought he's a really good separator, really good hands. I just think maybe the going from a G5 school to a P5 school. So for those of you who don't watch a lot of college football, going from a like lower end how do I want a competition level to like the Georgias, Ohio States of the world is a big jump. He didn't even do that. He went straight from the G5 to the NFL. That's a massive jump for some of these guys. And I think that was a little bit much for him in his rookie season. I actually do think he could end up having a really good year here. So thank you so much to everybody just continually sniping me in this draft. I was really hoping some of these guys were going to fall to me. Duh, no, there's no way. Did Evan Ingram go? Oh my God. Okay, I thought he was still here. I'm really doing a bad job paying attention. So both the two guys that I really wanted were Tyler Lockett and Evan Ingram, and both of those guys went. So looking at the board here, I'm just going to take look, I think Justin Fields is in for a really good year this year. I'm going to take probably their deep threat in Darnell Mooney and just hope for some big games from him. I know it's not best ball, which I think to be a much better best ball pick. So if he does have those blow up games, he just fits right in my lineup. After him, I love Garrett Wilson. Absolute stud. He's going to be a top 10 wide receiver here soon. But we know Aaron Rodgers loves throwing to his guys. He gets Allen Lazard to go to the New York Jets. He's going to be a touchdown monster for them. I really don't love any of their tight ends. I think he's going to be their red zone threat. So I'll take a guy paired with, again, we talked about earlier. You and Garrett, Dave, we all think Aaron Rodgers could have that bounce back year. Just give him the guy that he wanted to come with him to New York and Allen Lazard.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on the Allen Lazard pick. Look, I want Garrett Wilson to get every single target, but I know that he's going to find his guys. He's going to throw to his guys. It did open things up with Moore being gone. The one kind of forgotten man is Mecole Hardman that ended up going to the Jets this offseason. I legitimately forgot about it until like 3 days ago, and I was looking through ADP and I was like, oh, that's right. Mecole Hardman did go to the Jets. I forgot he is alive. So it was, it is going to be an interesting wide receiver room to see how everything kind of comes together and shakes out. I'm going to go here and let's go through 16 rounds. I think 16 rounds will be good. We'll have a pretty good snapshot of our teams, and then we can kind of do some recapping and some talking about different guys. I'm going to take Luke Schoonmaker here. This is this is like my favorite guy to draft in rookie drafts right now, because we heard a lot of rumors that Schoonmaker that the Dallas Cowboys desperately wanted to take a tight end. And whether that was smoke, whether that was legit, who knows for sure. But it really seemed like they wanted Dalton Kincaid, and the Buffalo Bills jumped up to make sure that they got Kincaid before the Dallas Cowboys did. But to wait just a single round and get Schoonmaker, I'm surprised he doesn't go earlier, because we've already seen guys like Michael Mayer. He went in the 8th round. We saw Musgrave. He went in the 11th round. Like a lot of Sam Laporta went in the 10th round. A lot of these players that were taken in the same round at the same position 3, 4, 5 rounds earlier than Schoonmaker. And you could argue that Dallas was the best landing spot for any tight end out of all of these guys. Now, we'll see what happens with Peyton Hendershot and Ferguson and guys like that, but I don't think any of those guys that were drafted in the 5th, 6th, 7th rounds are going to hold back a guy that was a 2nd round pick. So I think Schoonmaker is currently one of the most underrated rookies in this class. So Dave, that is going to put you back on the clock here momentarily. We got 2 picks coming up. What are you thinking about this next pick?
Man, I'm kind of surprised Ryan Tannehill's still on the board, and it's another gross veteran quarterback, but you're looking at a guy who's probably going to be starting this year. I don't think Malik Willis is going to challenge him for a job, and maybe Levis can, but yeah, I'm thinking about it, but no, I'm going to go with Rashad Penny here. Rashad Penny is a guy that I just love. I mean, we know the story with Rashad Penny. When he's healthy and playing, he's one of the best running backs in the NFL. He's just unfortunately never healthy, but now he's in a great spot with Philadelphia. I actually just stumbled across this the other day. He is the all-time leader in yards per carry. 5.7 yards per carry throughout his career. It's unbelievable. We just unfortunately never get to see him fully healthy. So again, this late in the draft, swinging for upside, got upside with Rashad Penny. And then Ryan Tannehill made it back around to me. So why not? I'll take Ryan Tannehill here as my Is this my QB5 now? Yeah, QB5.
Scooping up that
Every
value.
quarterback I've got. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if he's going to be starting for sure this year, but if he does get cut for whatever reason, I think he could probably bounce back somewhere as a starter. But I don't know, man. Tannehill's a weird pick there.
Yeah, who knows? There's a lot of other teams too that could easily use him as their bridge quarterback, like
Atlanta
he was for a little bit. And who knows if he keeps that job, like he did last time, or like Geno Smith just did, or we've seen that happen. There are teams that need that consistent quarterback play, and he could absolutely keep that job. Baker Mayfield is another guy that's kind of in the same boat as Ryan Tannehill right now. We'll see if he can keep the job or not. Obviously, there were some seasons where he looked great and some seasons where he looked truly terrible. So we'll kind of just have to wait and see what happens here. So I am up here in the 15th round. This is going to be my second to last pick, the penultimate pick for me. And I'll go with a second-year wide receiver that I think is just a perfect pairing with his new quarterback. I'm going to take Alec Pierce. Good deep threat, long speed, can go up and get the football. And I think that's what Anthony Richardson's going to be looking for, because we saw that absolute cannon on display early and often watching his tape. Now, we saw him miss some stuff too, but if there's going to be a guy that's consistently catching those deep passes, Pierce would be the most logical option for that. So I'm going to take Alec Pierce here. Another one of these ceiling plays, and that's really what you got to do at this point in the draft is, where's there a path? Where is there a ceiling? And I think Alec Pierce has that. Matt, how do you feel about Alec Pierce?
I love Alec Pierce. I saw Dennis was in the comments, and I don't know if he's still here. I said it. I thought he was going to be a wide receiver 2 this year with that offense. With Anthony Richardson, and this is actually why I think I've said when the draft coverage happened, everybody loved the landing spot of Josh Downs going there with that offensive line, Anthony Richardson. I actually think Alec Pierce benefits more from having Anthony Richardson. He was much more accurate going down the field than he was in the short area. He actually really struggled passing the ball in like the short intermediate area where obviously Josh Downs is going to thrive. I think Alec Pierce is the perfect kind of weapon for him, because I would equate him a lot to Desmond Ridder with the accuracy issues that he has. You want to give him those big targets. You got Michael Pittman, who can play in the short intermediate area, and then you just throw it deep to a guy like Alec Pierce who's going to go up and go get it. So I love that pick.
All right, you're up.
I'm just going to take two guys here just because I want to talk about them. So we were talking about the tight ends. I think Tucker Kraft is going to end up being a one of the better tight ends. I think he's going to end up being possibly the best tight end in this draft class. It could end up being historic with all the tight ends that went. I don't want to compare him to this player overall because this is a Hall of Fame player, but he fits in the mold of a Travis Kelce type. He is this guy who's an extremely good route runner. He is very athletic. He has got incredible hands. And I think we kind of all overlooked him because he's playing at North Dakota. Like he was not on anybody's radar. But with him going to Green Bay, I know they took Luke Musgrave earlier. Luke Musgrave played 4 years of college football, and he barely played 20 games, guys. Like that's not even 2 full seasons of college football games. He's always injured. I think Tucker Kraft could end up being the guy there. And then the other one, just since a couple of the wide receivers I really wanted went, we know Kevin Stefanski loves running these 2 running back sets. And Nick Chubb has also been injured a little bit, and the Browns did not take any running back really to back anybody up, and Kareem Hunt's not coming back. Give me Jerome Ford, who I thought was a great pick for the Browns last year. I think they're going to use him a lot, and again, as my wide receiver, I think they're my running back 5 now. Like, I'm perfectly fine with the guy as a bye-week fill-in.
Yeah, no, there are a lot of things coming out about Jerome Ford being more involved, being more utilized this year, and Nick Chubb, as much as I love Nick Chubb, he's never really shown consistency in the receiving game. They don't have any desire to really use him that way consistently. For all of my teams that have him, I would love for him to be consistently used that way, but I just don't see it happening realistically anytime soon. All right, my last pick here. I'm scrolling through, And this is a fun like dart throw range because there's a lot of players where you're like, this pick, I could literally light it on fire, and it could be worth absolutely nothing. But every year you see guys taken in this range that end up just rising in ADP drastically, whether it's a rookie that was a late round guy or a second year player that gets an opportunity or someone that's an injury away and now all of a sudden they really show what they can be. So it is a very fun range to draft in, even though you don't have any super high hopes of any of these players. And I'll tell you the two players that I was torn between. The first one was Michael Wilson for the Arizona Cardinals, guy that was taken in the third round of this draft. So a third round wide receiver falling this far is really far. And we talked about there's a real chance that DeAndre Hopkins could end up being moved. So that's a really tempting pick there for me because he could end up being their ex receiver at some point, which seems wild, but it's in the realm of possibility. But I am going to go, instead of that route, I'm going to go with Dwayne McBride. I really, really enjoy Dwayne McBride's tape. Watching him, he is the definition of run through your face. Like, just the physical attributes that just are fun to watch. I truly thought he was going to be taken significantly higher than he ended up going. I really thought, and we saw guys like Mel Kiper and Daniel Jeremiah have him as a top 5-6 back in this class. For some reason, he slipped really far, but we see players in this range do stuff every year. We talked about Aaron Jones, Isaiah Pacheco, James Robinson, who was undrafted. Like, there are players all the time in this range that end up doing something. And I think Dwayne McBride could end up being that guy. We saw almost a very similar situation that could unfold here happen with James Robinson a few years ago. The starting running back, who is a very good one for a while, and Leonard Fournette ends up getting cut. We could see the same thing happen with Dalvin Cook. Then some of the guys that were established there a little bit end up getting injured, and they just really need somebody that can fill in and be that between the tackles grinder. Dwayne McBride could absolutely be that player. Who knows if it'll end up working out, but I at least like the player enough to take that chance here in the 16th round. So last but not least, and I'll let the last pick play out while you're talking here, Dave. But Dave, you got the last pick out of the three of us here, and you ended up going with Collins. How do you feel about Nico Collins here?
I love Nico Collins. He's a guy that I'm trying to get on as many dynasty rosters as I can. You know, he basically face planted as a rookie, didn't really do too much that season, and then got off to a slow start last year. But by the time that he started seeing full-time snaps, and, you know, he was getting a 70, 80% snap share and above, he was pretty much pacing for a 1,000-yard season. He had actually supplanted Nico Collins right before his season-ending injury, and it looked like he was the wide receiver one in Houston. And he's had an uphill battle so far, man. Catching passes from Davis Mills and Tyrod Taylor and Kyle Allen and Jeff Driscoll. I mean, it hasn't been pretty for Nico Collins. So if you're of the mindset that CJ Stroud is going to come into Houston and make that team a little bit better, you've got to hope that that's going to bode well for Nico Collins as it stands right now. Just like the pick that I made a couple rounds ago with Juju Smith-Schuster, he currently stands possibly atop the roster. I mean, unless you think that an old Robert Woods is going to still have it and be the wide receiver one there, there's a very good chance that Nico Collins is the wide receiver one for the Texans this year.
I love drafting the entire Houston receiving core late in drafts. Like, I'll literally just take all of them because I don't know which one's going to pan out. But Tank Dell just went in the 14th round. Nico went in the 16th. John Mechie didn't get drafted. Xavier Hutchinson didn't get drafted. And I'm willing to put all of those guys on my team and just hope that one of them ends up being a legit playmaker for this roster at some point. So I'm good with any of those guys. And you mentioned Robert Woods. He's a fine one for this season. Obviously, we know he's not long-term. But how do you feel, Bruening, about the wide receiver core here for the Texans?
I mean, it's bad, honestly, and I would not be surprised if I would bet CJ Stroud is hoping they're in the running for Marvin Harrison Jr. next year. That would be his hope. But I mean, I think Nico Collins probably has the best shot to be the best one. I actually think him and Tank Dell could both be very intriguing. I mean, for those Ohio State fans out there, I think that they'll fit very well into the, if you want to go to his most productive time with like a Garrett Wilson JSN roles with Tank Dell in the slot and Nico on the outside. Obviously, those guys don't think it's unfair to say are not quite as talented as the other two players that came from Ohio State, but I think that they could be very productive with a big step up in quarterback play, getting CJ Stroud under center.
All right, guys. So we have finished up our draft here, and let's go through the rosters first. Dave, we'll let you go first. Kind of talk us through your roster. What pick that you made was your favorite pick, and if you had one of them that you could kind of do over, this one I'd probably like to do over.
Yeah, I got to be honest, man. This isn't my favorite mock that I've ever done. I felt like it was kind of all over the place. At first when I went with Kyler Murray and Kyle Pitts in rounds 2 and 3, I thought that I was committing to a productive struggle, but then started having some good veteran value fall to me, and I ended up with 5 possible starting quarterbacks. So, if this season were to play out, I'd be looking to move some of those guys around and hopefully accrue some future picks for these veteran quarterbacks. Really, though, I just keep looking at Quentin Johnson and Christian Watson in the 4th and 5th round. And I really don't like those picks at all. And those were early picks that I'm just not too crazy about. Everybody went wide receiver crazy in this draft early, and it left wide receivers really thin. And while I had committed to this idea that I was going to kind of punt away year one, I didn't want to take any running backs. But in hindsight, I probably would have liked Josh Jacobs, Nick Chubb, Tony Pollard. There's a few running backs that I wish I would have taken above or before those wide receivers, but just got to keep playing it as the cards are dealt to you. And overall, I do like the depth that I ended up with in the wide receiver room. Getting Marquise Brown, Rashad Bateman, Juju, and Collins a little bit later. So this team, even though the intent was to do the year one punt and kind of play it out from there, I think this team actually does have somewhat of a chance to contend. I'd probably have to move some assets around, though, swap out some of these quarterbacks for some active running backs.
What was your favorite pick? What was the one that you walked away with like, yeah, that was good?
Rashad Bateman in the 10th.
Yeah.
And I really like the 2 wide receivers that I took, Rashad Bateman and Marquise Brown in the 10th and 7th. I like both of those. But I'll go with Bateman. Like I said, rookie year left a little bit to be desired, but I think that we can just chalk up last year as an injury-plagued season and not read too much into it. I think that he steps in as the wide receiver 1 here was really, I really do like Zay Flowers a lot, but was surprised to see the huge gap in ADP between, or well, I guess not ADP, but just draft position between Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman. I think it's kind of a coin flip as to who the wide receiver 1 is going to be. And it seems like Lamar Jackson really likes Bateman. So if he does end up being that long-term wide receiver 1 for the Ravens, that's a steal at the end of the 10th.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Matt, what about you? How did you feel everything played out for you? What pick did you walk away with? Like, yeah, that was a great pick there. And then what one would you look at and be like, if I could have a do-over button, I probably would do this one over?
Before I jump on my team, I want to echo something Dave just said real quick on the Bateman pick, because I meant to say this earlier. I actually think he will be the wide receiver 1. I don't think there's a competition between him and Zay Flowers. I mean, if you look, I know Zay played a lot on the outside for Boston College. He does not have the size to play on the outside in the NFL. He's going to be, I think, relegated to the slot where Bateman can play on the outside. If you look at what Todd Monken's done, his best NFL season, Baker Mayfield's best season ever in Cleveland, was when Todd Monken was their offensive coordinator. And who had 1,000-yard seasons? The field stretcher and Odell Beckham Jr. The only year he had 1,000 yards in Cleveland was that year Todd Monken was the offensive coordinator. And then their slot player, Jarvis Landry, I think is going to be Mark Andrews. So I do think Bateman's going to end up being the 1. My favorite pick, I mean, it was probably JK getting him in the 6th. I really liked getting him there as my RB2 because, I mean, again, I do think he could end up maybe coming in as a back-end RB1. Right. I also really loved the pick of Anthony Richardson. I was not the biggest fan of him to start the college football season, but again, a guy who could end up being a top 5 quarterback. And I think he was like the 6th quarterback off the board. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The 9th quarterback off the board, but he has a chance to be a top 5 guy. The pick that I don't like now going back and looking at is George Kittle. I really think if I'd have just taken Dobbins in the 6th and then Amari Cooper, who I was really hoping would fall to me in the 7th, I'd have felt a lot better about my wide receiver room because I'm either going to be paying attention to this league all year long or I'm going to be out by like week 5 because Hopkins is injured and Allen's out and Aaron Jones is down and like my team is just completely crapping the bed. So like that's the part I really wish I should have gone Amari Cooper and then taken like an Evan Ingram a little bit later, who I was targeting, just to kind of build out that wide receiver core a little bit more.
No, it makes a lot of sense. With mine, I was pretty happy with the team overall. Felt like it had a pretty good balance of, guys that are a little bit younger, guys a little bit older, and then most of the guys that were right in their prime. So I think it gives me a chance to compete right away, but also a little more longevity than a traditional win now model. The pick that if I could do it over again, it's tough because I don't know who I would have gone with, but I didn't love Debo at 7.5. But looking at like the players after, I don't know who I would have gone with. So I'm going to go with the David Montgomery pick at 10. I feel like there were some other players at other positions that I could have capitalized on more, even if it would have been another quarterback. Even looking back at like Alexander Madison, I could have got him 2.5 rounds later. So I kind of felt like I reached a little bit on David Montgomery there. The pick that I really did like, though, was the Jahan Dotson pick. I think he's a really good value that late in drafts to be a young player that we've already seen produce a little bit so far. If there was one draft that you're like, man, I think this guy really killed it, whose draft in here do you look at and you're like, man, we should have had them on as an analyst because they really cleaned up. The one I'm going to go with is the guy that drafted right before me, Ian Evans. I really liked his draft overall. It's risky not taking the quarterback there that early, but I think he played it out really nicely. He's got a young receiver core with Jefferson, Olave, Williams, and then Treylon Burks. But then he also really went hard at quarterback and had some good value at quarterback. He got Bryce Young, and then he got Will Levis, Kenny Pickett, Derek Carr, Brock Purdy. So 5 potential starting quarterbacks, most of those guys being extremely young with the exception of Derek Carr. All those guys are in their first or second season. So a lot there, but then still ended up with Javonte Williams to kind of lead the pack. I know that might mean his team doesn't quite win it this year with the quarterback being too young, not as much that running back, but I think this is a slightly more on the productive struggle side that could get a lot of value out of these quarterbacks and then trade them if Kenny Pickett balls out or Will Levis becomes who we think he could be, or even Brock Purdy in the 11th round. He might be a better pick than Trey Lance in the 6th round when it's all said and done. So we'll have to see how that all plays out. So that was one draft that I kind of looked at and I was like, yeah, I like that draft quite a bit. Any one of those stick out to either one of you guys? Dave, we'll start with you.
I like M. Hensler. I could nitpick a few things. I probably would have taken another wide receiver in the mid rounds rather than going 4 out of 5 running backs there in rounds 5 through 7. But I really like that start. I got Lawrence. You don't want to put him in that elite tier yet, but he certainly looked the part at the end of last year. So, we could be talking about Lawrence next year in the same conversation as, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, and Jalen Hurts at the very top of the board. Maybe not, a guarantee, but he definitely showed that potential. Garrett Wilson and Tyreek Hill. Those are guys that could both realistically challenge to be the wide receiver 1 overall this year. And then Daniel Jones is a guy that just keeps getting slept on for some reason. Almost a locked and loaded QB1 right now. I don't know exactly how long he's going to be the long-term starter there in New York, but you're looking at the next few years where you're going to be getting at a minimum back-end QB1 production from him. So really like the start to that draft. Like I said, I could nitpick a few things with the middle rounds, but I think that's a pretty good draft overall.
What about you, Bruening? Was there one that you walked away with like, yeah, that guy did well?
Yeah, Hensler's I thought was fairly good as well. He's got really good wide receiver depth, including adding a Tyler Lockett, who I know he's toward the end of his contract. He's been a top 10 fantasy wide receiver for like 4 years straight, and you're getting him in the 13th round. I would argue he's probably going to do close to that again this year. So since you talked about him, I'm gonna go with this Sports Fanatic MB guy. I don't know who that is. Just killed the draft now. I know it's kind of a bad thing to say because I'm pretty sure this was an auto drafted team, but Team 10, I don't know if that was actually an auto draft. That's actually, I really like that team. Had they gotten a different, another quarterback to pair with Justin Fields, A.J. Brown, T. Higgins, Drake London, Devontae Adams, and a running back core of Swift, Henry, Charbonnet, Evans, Zeke, if he lands on a team, it's actually a really good team. If they could, that's the team right there that's come week 2 is hitting up Dave like, hey, what is it going to take to get Geno Smith or Ryan Tannehill? Because they're going to be competing for something.
Yeah, that's the tough part. Not getting a second quarterback hurts, but you're right. The rest of the roster does look like they could absolutely win it all right now. Well, guys, that is the show for tonight. Thank you guys both so much for joining. I know it's a long one, but it's a perfect opportunity to go through a mock draft, talk through all the picks. Dave, remind everyone where they can find you on Twitter, what you're up to, and anything else you'd want to plug.
Yeah, real simple. You can find me on Twitter at Dave Kluge. Don't recommend following me unless you got a heavy dose of sarcasm and humor, because I just have a lot of fun on Twitter. But you can find all my content over at footballguys.com. Right now, the main thing that I'm doing are these player spotlight articles. I read about 1,500 to 2,000 words on a player, just a real deep dive on their 2023 outlook. So far, I published Justin Fields. I got a Christian McCaffrey one that should be getting published any day now. Amon-Ra St. Brown. I just wrapped up Kyle Pitts one today, and I'm doing those every single day for the next couple of weeks. So you can find all those over at footballguys.com.
Matt, what about you, my man?
I mean, you can follow me at Sports Fanatic MB, and if you don't care about college football, I'd suggest you not, because that's practically all I tweet about. And then everything I do is at Campus to Can. If you have any interest in the format, the college football game, check us out. It's our love of football right there. The way you guys love the NFL, we love college football. So all my content's there. I mean, I'm diving into high school players at the moment, so I don't know that really excites a lot of people listening for NFL content, but it looks like a decent class right now, quarterback class at least. So.
Matt, I do want you real quickly, if you don't mind, plug the program league, because it's way different than like any league almost anyone's ever played. But it's a boatload of fun. Can you plug that real quick?
Yeah. I mean, so Derek Bosworth, yourself, and me created this league where it's the NCAA video game, but in a fantasy football format. You actually recruit players. There's a format that you go through. You can go on based on your recruiting, your education. You get pipeline stage, your coaching. You run an air raid system. Are you smash mouth? All this other stuff. It's literally the NCAA game, but in a fantasy football format. It is a ton of fun. We build all kinds of content out around it too. We do a YouTube show. We do a recruiting YouTube show for that every single week. If you like to see someone really who has anger issues, name might rhyme with Matt Mooning, who gets mad when he loses out on recruits and yells and curses, check it out. But it is definitely a one-of-a-kind league, and I think we just added a 5th division, so 5 divisions of 12 teams all competing for 2 championships, an NFL championship and a college championship every single year.
Yeah, it is. It's a boatload of fun. I need to get better on the college side, because the deficiency is I love Devy, but the C2C is a whole nother aspect. So, I don't know who the starting tight end for Middle Tennessee to Middle Tennessee State is. Like, I just don't. Matt could probably list like
that was the worst. That was the worst school for you to pick, is Middle Tennessee. You could have gone anywhere else, and I might have been able to help you out there. Middle Tennessee is not my area of expertise.
Yeah, but these guys go super deep. It is a boatload of fun. The shows behind it, all of the stuff, pairing it in. So, Matt, I really do appreciate you hopping on here tonight, joining us for this mock draft. And Dave, you as well. This is, we haven't got to work together a ton in the past, but every time we've gotten a chance to hang out, talk about drafts, all that kind of stuff, I've really enjoyed it. The last time was on Yates' show.
Yates' draft show last year.
Yeah. So it's been well over a year now. So I appreciate you saying that you'd be willing to come on and join us here tonight for this. So real quick, couple things that I want to remind everyone of. The Fantasy Alarm subscription. Get all pro access to Fantasy Alarm award-winning DFS playbook covering 10 different sports. That's right, 10 different sports, fantasy football, NFL betting, all that kind of stuff. Tools, podcast, Discord, chat. Limited time. Get it for 50% off your first 6 months with promo code ALARM50. You can find me on Twitter at Dynasty Price. I am here every week, 9 o'clock to 11 p.m. Dennis Bennett joins me almost every week as well. You can also find all of my stuff at dynastynerds.com. The podcast, the Nerd Score, the GM tool. If you haven't hopped in there, get the GM tool. It will change your life and how you look at your leagues. So for myself, for Dave, for T behind the glass, appreciate you guys. See you next week.